gun was pointing at the guard's heart. People started screaming. Camera phones dropped to the ground. Children cried as their parents grabbed them and ran. Marcus Chen stood in the middle of the chaos, holding a rifle that did not belong to him. His hands were steady because he had done this 1,000 times before, but this time was different. This time, he was not in Los Angeles. This time, he had just made a terrible mistake. Marcus was a SWAT officer. For 15 years, he had protected people in dangerous situations. He had saved hostages. He had stopped armed criminals. He knew how to spot danger in a crowded place. His training taught him to act fast when something looked wrong. That training had saved many lives back home in America. But now he was in London with his wife Sarah. They were on vacation. It was their 10th wedding anniversary. They had saved money for 3 years to afford this trip. Sarah had always wanted to see Buckingham Palace. She loved the royal guard with their red uniforms and tall black hats. She thought they looked like something from a fairy tale. Marcus had agreed to come, even though he did not like to travel. He worked long hours. He saw terrible things at his job. This vacation was supposed to help him relax. Sarah hoped they could reconnect and remember why they fell in love. They were watching the guards outside the palace when a man in a dark jacket was moving quickly through the crowd. His hand went inside his coat. Marcus's heart started racing. His training kicked in. Everything happened in slow motion and fast motion at the same time. The nearest guard was a young man with a fresh face. He stood perfectly still like all the guards do. Marcus moved before he could think. He stepped forward, grabbed the guard's rifle, and pulled it away. The guard was so surprised he'd let go. Marcus spun around and aimed at the man in the dark jacket. "Get down," Marcus shouted. "Show me your hands." The man in the dark jacket froze. His hand came out of his coat. He was holding a camera. Just a camera. He was a tourist from Japan trying to take a picture. Marcus felt his stomach drop. The world came back into focus. He heard Sarah screaming his name. He heard police whistles blowing. Heavy footsteps ran toward him. Strong hands grabbed him from behind. The rifle was knocked from his grip. His face hit the cold stone ground. His arms were twisted behind his back. Metal handcuffs bit into his wrists. The young guard stood there with empty hands. His face was white as paper. Tourists had their phones out, recording everything. The videos would be online in minutes. Marcus had just attacked a royal guard in front of Buckingham Palace. He had taken a weapon on foreign soil. He had created an international incident. Sarah was crying somewhere behind him. Police officers were shouting. Marcus closed his eyes and knew his life would never be the same. Everything he had worked for, everything he had built, was gone in 5 seconds. 5 seconds of instinct that should have protected people, but instead had destroyed everything. The young guard picked up his rifle with shaking hands. His name was Thomas Whitmore. He had trained for 2 years to earn this position. His grandfather had guarded the palace. His father had guarded the palace. Thomas had dreamed of this honor since he was a little boy. Now, in front of the whole world, a stranger had taken his weapon like he was nothing. Like he was a child, playing dress-up instead of a real soldier, Marcus was dragged away toward a police van. He tried to look back at Sarah, but the officers pushed his head down. The last thing he saw was Thomas, standing at his post, trying to look normal, trying to pretend this had not just happened. But everyone knew. The whole world would know soon. Inside the police van, Marcus sat alone. His wrists hurt from the handcuffs. His shoulder hurt from hitting the ground. But the worst pain was in his chest, in his heart. He had spent 15 years protecting people. Now he was the criminal. Now he was the threat. His training had betrayed him. Or maybe he had betrayed his training. He could not tell anymore. Sarah stood outside the palace gates sobbing. A kind police officer brought her to a separate area. They needed her statement. They needed to know if she was involved. She tried to explain that Marcus was a good man, that he was just trying to help, that he would never hurt anyone on purpose. But her words sounded weak even to her own ears. The facts were simple and clear. Her husband had assaulted a British soldier. Nothing she said could change that. Thomas remained at his post for another hour. The rules said he must not move, must not speak, must not show emotion. So he stood like a statue while tourists whispered and pointed. He stood while his fellow guards gave him looks of pity. He stood while his commanding officer arrived and took notes. Every second felt like an hour. Every breath felt like swallowing glass. When his shift finally ended, Thomas walked to the changing room on legs that barely worked. He sat down on the bench in his red uniform and felt tears coming. He fought them back. Soldiers do not cry. Guards do not cry. But his hands would not stop shaking. Someone had taken his rifle. Someone had made him look weak. The shame was worse than any physical pain. The police station was cold and gray. Marcus sat in a small room with no windows. A detective named Patricia Morrison sat across from him. She had short brown hair and tired eyes. She looked at Marcus like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. Marcus tried to explain everything. He told her about his job in Los Angeles. He described the shootings he had responded to. He talked about the times when acting fast had saved innocent people. He wanted her to understand that he was not a bad person. He was just a man whose training had kicked in at the wrong time. Detective Morrison listened without saying much. She wrote notes in a small notebook. Sometimes she asked questions. Her voice was calm but firm. She did not seem angry, but she did not seem sympathetic either. She was just doing her job. Behind her stood two other officers and a man in an expensive suit. The man said he was from the Home Office. Marcus did not know what that meant exactly, but he knew it was serious. The British government was involved now. This was bigger than just a mistake. This was an international problem. In another room, Sarah was also giving her statement. A female officer sat with her and offered tea. Sarah could not stop crying. She kept saying this was supposed to be a happy trip. She kept asking if Marcus would go to prison. The officer could not give her answers. Everything depended on what the prosecutors decided. Sarah thought about their life back home. Their small house in the suburbs. Their dog named Bailey. Their plans to maybe have children someday. All of that felt far away now, like a dream she was waking up from. She wondered if Marcus would lose his job. She wondered if they would lose their house. She wondered if their marriage could survive this. Marcus had always been intense about his work. He took it seriously, maybe too seriously. Sarah had learned to accept that part of him, but sometimes she wished he could just be normal. She wished he could go on vacation without analyzing every person in the crowd. She wished he could relax without always being ready for danger. Now, his inability to relax had created this nightmare. Sarah felt angry and sad at the same time. She was angry at Marcus for being so reactive, but she was also sad for him because she knew he had been trying to protect people. His intentions were good, but the results were terrible. Thomas Whitmore sat in his commanding officer's office. Colonel James Hartford was an older man with gray hair and a chest full of medals. He had been in the military for almost 40 years. He had seen many things, but nothing quite like this. The colonel told Thomas that he was not in trouble. The incident was not his fault. No one blamed him for what happened. But the colonel's face showed concern. He explained that the videos were spreading online. Millions of people had already seen them. The palace was receiving complaints and questions from the media. Thomas listened and felt sick. He knew what the colonel was going to say before he said it. The suggestion came gently, but it felt like a hammer blow. Perhaps Thomas should consider a transfer. Perhaps a different position would be better. Something away from the public eye. Something less ceremonial. Thomas wanted to scream. He wanted to say that this was not fair. He had done nothing wrong. Why should he be punished? Why should he give up his dream because some American tourist had made a mistake? But he did not scream. He sat straight in his chair like a proper soldier and nodded. He said he would think about it. When he left the colonel's office, Thomas walked slowly through the palace halls. Other guards looked at him with pity. Some tried to say encouraging things. Their words meant well, but they made Thomas feel worse. He did not want pity. He did not want encouragement. He wanted to go back in time and make this day never happen. His phone kept buzzing with messages. Friends asking if he was okay. Family members who had seen the news. Fellow soldiers offering support. Thomas turned off his phone. He could not deal with any of it right now. He went home to his small apartment and sat in the dark. He was still wearing his uniform because he had forgotten to change. The red fabric that used to make him feel proud now felt like a costume. He looked at himself in the mirror and did not recognize the person looking back. That person looked defeated. That person looked broken. Marcus spent the night in a holding cell. The bed was hard and thin. The lights never turned completely off. He could not sleep. He kept replaying those 5 seconds over and over in his mind. If only he had waited one more second. If only he had looked more carefully. If only he had remembered he was on vacation, not on duty. Morning came with bad news. Marcus's lawyer arrived early. Her name was Jennifer Walsh, and the American embassy had assigned her to his case. She sat across from him in a meeting room and explained the charges. Assault on a military officer. Creating a public disturbance. Unlawful handling of a weapon. Each charge carried serious penalties. Jennifer spoke in a professional tone, but Marcus could see worry in her eyes. She explained that the British government was under pressure to make an example of him. The videos had gone viral. News channels in multiple countries were covering the story. Some American news outlets were defending Marcus, saying he was just being cautious. British media was calling him an arrogant American, who had disrespected their traditions. The worst part was the legal complexity. Marcus was an American citizen, but he had committed crimes on British soil. The two governments were negotiating how to handle it. The American embassy wanted to protect their citizen. The British government wanted to show they took the incident seriously. Jennifer explained that Marcus might face deportation. He would definitely be banned from entering the United Kingdom again. His career with the Los Angeles Police Department was also in danger. They had already placed him on leave pending an investigation. If he was convicted of a crime in Britain, he would likely lose his job back home. Marcus listened and felt numb. His entire life was collapsing. 15 years of service, 15 years of doing good work, and it all meant nothing now. One mistake had erased everything. He thought about calling his captain back in Los Angeles, but what would he say? Sorry, I created an international incident on my vacation. The absurdity of it would be funny if it was not so devastating. Sarah visited him later that morning. They sat on opposite sides of a table in a visitation room. A guard stood by the door watching them. Sarah's eyes were red from crying. She had barely slept at the hotel. She kept imagining Marcus in a British prison, kept thinking about how to explain this to their families back home. They talked quietly. Sarah asked what the lawyer had said. Marcus told her everything, his voice flat and tired. Sarah reached across the table and took his hand. Despite everything, despite the anger and fear, she still loved him. She could see how broken he was. She knew he had not meant for any of this to happen, but love did not fix the situation. Love did not make the charges disappear. Sarah had already checked their bank account. The bail money had taken most of their savings. They would need more money for legal fees. She might need to take a second job when they got home. If Marcus was allowed to go home, they sat in silence for a while, just holding hands. The guard by the door checked his watch. Visiting time was almost over. Sarah squeezed Marcus's hand one more time before standing up. She promised to visit again tomorrow. She promised they would get through this together. But her promises sounded hollow in the cold room. After Sarah left, Marcus was taken back to his cell. He sat on the hard bed and stared at the wall. He thought about Thomas, the young guard whose weapon he had taken. Marcus wondered if the guard was okay. He wondered if the guard hated him. Probably yes. Marcus would hate himself too if their positions were reversed. Thomas was having his own difficult morning. He had been called back to the palace for more meetings. His commanding officer wanted to go over the incident again. Security officials needed details for their report. Everyone was very polite, but Thomas could feel the judgment. They all saw him as the guard who got disarmed by a tourist. The colonel brought up the transfer suggestion again. This time, it was less of a suggestion and more of a recommendation. They had a position available at the Tower of London. It was still ceremonial, still honorable, but less visible. Fewer tourists. less media attention. The colonel presented it as an opportunity. But Thomas knew it was a gentle push toward the exit. Thomas asked for time to think about it. The colonel agreed, but made it clear that a decision needed to come soon. The longer Thomas stayed in his current position, the more the incident would be remembered. A fresh start somewhere else might be better for everyone. Walking through London after the meeting, Thomas felt lost. He had lived in this city his whole life, but now it felt foreign. People on the street did not recognize him without his uniform. He was just another young man in jeans and a jacket. Anonymous. Invisible. Part of him liked that feeling. Part of him hated it. Marcus posted bail after 2 days in custody. The amount was substantial, but the American embassy helped arrange it. Richard Carlson, a diplomat assigned to the case, drove Marcus back to his hotel. During the ride, Richard explained the political situation. Both governments wanted this resolved quietly. A long trial would generate more media attention. They were discussing a plea deal. Marcus asked what that meant. Richard explained that if Marcus pleaded guilty to lesser charges, he would likely face deportation and a ban from the UK, but possibly no jail time. The British government would look tough on security. The American government could bring their citizen home. Everyone would save face. Except Marcus, who would still have a criminal record. Sarah was waiting at the hotel. She hugged Marcus tightly when he walked in. The room felt different now, tainted by what had happened. Their suitcases sat unpacked. Tourist brochures for places they would never visit were scattered on the desk. Their anniversary trip had become a disaster they would never forget. Marcus took a shower, the first real one in 2 days. The hot water felt amazing, but it could not wash away his guilt. He kept thinking about Thomas. The image of the young guard's shocked face haunted him. Marcus had humiliated another soldier, another man who dedicated his life to service. That knowledge hurt more than any legal consequence. That night, Marcus made a decision. He told Sarah he wanted to apologize to Thomas in person. Sarah thought it was a bad idea. The lawyers would probably advise against it. Any contact could complicate the legal case. But Marcus did not care about that anymore. He needed Thomas to know he was sorry. He needed to face what he had done. The next morning, Marcus contacted Jennifer Walsh, his lawyer. She was surprised by the request, but said she would try to arrange it. It would need to go through official channels. The Metropolitan Police, the British military, the American embassy. Everyone would need to approve. It might not even be possible. But surprisingly, within 24 hours, Thomas agreed to meet. Jennifer seemed shocked when she called Marcus with the news. Apparently, Thomas had his own reasons for wanting to talk. They set up a meeting at the American embassy, neutral ground, with witnesses present for legal protection. Thomas spent those 24 hours thinking about why he had agreed. Part of him wanted to confront Marcus, to tell him face to face how much damage he had caused. Part of him wanted to understand what had been going through Marcus's mind. Part of him just wanted closure, some way to move past this nightmare. His mother called the night before the meeting. She had finally gotten through after Thomas had been avoiding her calls. Her voice was gentle, but worried. She asked if he was eating properly, if he was sleeping, if he was taking care of himself. Thomas lied and said yes to everything. His mother knew about the transfer offer. News traveled fast in military families. She said it might be a good opportunity, a fresh start. But Thomas could hear the sadness in her voice. She knew how much being a palace guard meant to him. She knew this was not what he wanted. After hanging up, Thomas looked at his uniform hanging in the closet. The red fabric looked darker in the dim light. He thought about his grandfather, who had served with such pride. His grandfather had stories about guarding the palace during the war, about standing strong when bombs fell on London, about never breaking position no matter what happened. What would his grandfather think of him now? Would he see Thomas as weak for letting someone take his rifle? Or would he understand that sometimes things happen beyond our control? Thomas did not know, and his grandfather had passed away 3 years ago. He could not ask. The morning of the meeting arrived. Thomas dressed in civilian clothes, a simple button-down shirt and slacks. He did not want to wear his uniform. This meeting was personal, not official. He looked at himself in the mirror and took a deep breath. Whatever happened in that meeting, he would face it with dignity. Marcus also prepared carefully. He shaved and put on his best clothes. Sarah helped him pick out a tie. She kissed him before he left and told him to be honest, to speak from his heart. Marcus nodded but felt terrified. What do you say to someone whose life you have damaged? Sorry felt inadequate. But it was all he had. The American Embassy building was impressive. All white stone and American flags. Security was tight. Marcus had to go through multiple checkpoints. Richard Carlson met him inside and walked him to a small conference room. Jennifer was already there, along with several other officials Marcus did not recognize. Then Thomas walked in, and the room fell silent. The two men looked at each other for the first time since the incident. Marcus saw a young man trying to appear strong, but the pain was visible in his eyes. Thomas saw an older man who looked tired and broken, not the aggressive figure from the videos. They sat down across from each other. An official explained the rules. This was not an official legal proceeding. Anything said here could not be used in court. This was simply an opportunity for dialogue. Both men had agreed to it voluntarily. They could leave at any time. Marcus spoke first. His voice shook slightly as he began. The words came slowly at first. Marcus explained that he had spent 15 years responding to dangerous situations. He described how training becomes instinct, how your body reacts before your mind can process. He talked about the shootings he had seen, the innocent people caught in crossfire, split seconds that determined life or death. He told Thomas about an incident 3 years ago. A man with a gun in a shopping mall? Marcus had been off duty, just buying groceries with Sarah. He saw the man pull out a weapon and immediately acted. He tackled the man, disarmed him, held him until police arrived. That man had been planning to shoot his ex-girlfriend who worked at the mall. Marcus's quick action had saved her life, and possibly many others. That incident had reinforced everything Marcus believed about staying alert, about trusting his instincts, about acting when something felt wrong. The department had given him a commendation. The woman he saved had written him a thank you letter that he kept in his desk at home. But here in London, those same instincts had betrayed him. Marcus's voice broke as he admitted this. He had been so sure he was preventing an attack. The man's movement, the hand going into the jacket, everything had seemed threatening. But he had been wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. Marcus looked directly at Thomas. He said he could not imagine what Thomas had felt in that moment. To have your weapon taken? To be made helpless in front of the world? To have your honor questioned? Marcus said he understood if Thomas hated him. He said he would hate himself if their positions were reversed. He said sorry was not enough, but it was all he had to offer. The room was completely quiet when Marcus finished. Thomas sat still, processing everything he had heard. Part of him wanted to stay angry. Anger was easier than understanding. Anger gave him someone to blame. But listening to Marcus describe his experiences, Thomas began to see the full picture. Thomas spoke next, his voice quieter than Marcus's had been. He talked about his family's military history. His great-grandfather had fought in World War I. His grandfather in World War II. His father had served for 30 years. Being a Royal Guard was not just a job for Thomas. It was his identity, his connection to his family's legacy, his way of honoring those who came before him. He described the training, the discipline, the pride he felt, putting on the uniform each day. He talked about tourists who mocked the guards, who tried to make them laugh or break position. He had learned to ignore all of that. But what Marcus had done was different. It was not mockery. It was assault. It had stripped away Thomas's dignity in a way that felt impossible to recover from. The transfer offer felt like exile, like punishment for being a victim. Thomas said he did not know if he could accept it. But he also did not know if he could return to his post at Buckingham Palace. Every tourist would remember. Every camera would be a reminder. The place he had loved now felt tainted. Thomas's voice got stronger as he continued. He said he did not know if he could forgive Marcus. The wound was too fresh. But he acknowledged that Marcus had not acted from cruelty. He recognized that years of trauma and training had shaped Marcus's response. He said understanding was not the same as forgiveness, but maybe it was a start. Marcus nodded, tears tears visible in his eyes. He thanked Thomas for meeting with him. He said he would have to live with this mistake for the rest of his life. Every time he closed his eyes, he would see Thomas's face. He would remember what his instincts had cost both of them. Jennifer Walsh spoke up then. She explained that Marcus would likely accept a plea deal. He would plead guilty to reduced charges. He would be deported and banned from the UK permanently. His career in law enforcement was probably over. He would carry this criminal record forever. Thomas listened to this and felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of him felt justice was being served. Marcus would face real consequences. But another part felt sad. 2 lives damaged because of 5 seconds. 2 careers possibly destroyed. Neither of them had wanted this. Richard Carlson suggested that both men might benefit from speaking to mental health professionals. The trauma of the incident would not disappear on its own. Thomas agreed quietly. Marcus also nodded. They both knew this was not something they could just forget. The meeting ended after an hour. As they stood to leave, Marcus extended his hand. Thomas looked at it for a long moment. Then, slowly, he shook it. The handshake was brief, not warm, but it was acknowledgement. 2 men who had been through something terrible together. Walking out of the embassy, Thomas felt lighter somehow. The anger was still there, but it was not consuming him anymore. He had looked Marcus in the eye and spoken his truth. That meant something. He still did not know what he would do about the transfer. He still did not know how to rebuild his sense of honor. But the meeting had given him something he had not expected. Perspective. Marcus returned to the hotel and held Sarah for a long time. She asked how it went. He told her it was hard but necessary. He said Thomas was a good man who deserved better than what had happened. Sarah agreed. They sat together on the hotel bed, facing an uncertain future, but facing it together. 3 days later, Marcus accepted the plea deal. He pleaded guilty to assault and public disturbance. The judge sentenced him to time served and immediate deportation. He was banned from the United Kingdom for life. The British media reported it as justice served. American media debated whether the punishment was too harsh. Thomas made his decision 2 weeks later. He accepted the transfer to the Tower of London. It was not what he had dreamed of, but it was still honorable service. His first day at the new post, he stood straight and proud. The tourists there did not know his story. He could start fresh. Both men carried the scars of that day. Marcus lost his career with LAPD and took a job as a security consultant, work that felt hollow compared to his old life. Thomas served well at his new position, but sometimes wondered what might have been. They never spoke again after that meeting at the embassy. But both men learned something from the experience. Marcus learned that instincts, however well-trained, must be balanced with judgment. Acting fast is not always acting right. Thomas learned that dignity comes from within, not from external circumstances. His honor was not defined by where he stood or what happened to him, but by how he responded. Years later, if asked about that day outside Buckingham Palace, both men would pause before answering. The memory still hurt. The regret still lingered, but they had survived it. They had faced each other with honesty. In a world of mistakes and consequences, sometimes that is all we can do. Acknowledge the damage, seek understanding, and try to move forward with whatever grace we can find.